The human delegation had expected many strange things when they were invited to the capital world of the Valarian Empire. They expected cold stares, heavy weapons, and long speeches in languages that needed translation. What they did not expect was silence so deep that it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The great hall was enormous. Its ceiling rose so high that it disappeared into soft blue light. Tall pillars shaped like twisted crystal lined the sides, and between them stood alien nobles of many forms. Some were tall and armored, their skin like metal. Others were thin and floating, with glowing eyes and robes that moved even when there was no wind. All of them were watching the human. His name was Daniel Cross. He was not a general, not a hero, and not even the most important member of the delegation. He was chosen because he stayed calm under pressure, and because he had a strange habit of smiling when others would panic. Right now, that calm smile was on his face again, though his heart was beating fast. At the far end of the hall sat the alien queen. She was massive, seated on a throne grown from living stone and gold. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, smooth and marked with faint glowing lines that pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. A crown floated just above her head, made of light and symbols that shifted constantly. Her eyes were bright silver, sharp and ancient. This was a being who had ruled for centuries and watched stars be born and die. When she spoke, the translators barely kept up. "Human representative," the queen said. Her voice was calm, but it carried power that made even the strongest aliens lower their heads. "By the laws of this empire, any outsider who stands before the throne must be given a role, a title."
"Speak it now!" Murmurs spread across the hall.
This was tradition. Most outsiders chose something safe. Observer, guest,
"Envoy!"
Some ambitious ones chose advisor and later regretted it. Daniel felt every eye turned toward him. He had been warned about this moment. The diplomats had rehearsed answers for days. Safe answers. Boring answers. Answers that would not cause trouble. But as Daniel looked at the queen, something unexpected happened. She was watching him with curiosity. Not hunger, not anger. Curiosity. It reminded him of a scientist looking at a strange new discovery, not a ruler looking at a weak creature. The tension made something inside Daniel snap, not in fear, but in humor, a small human reaction to an overwhelming moment. He smiled. Then he spoke. "Husband!" For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the hall exploded into noise. Laughter came first, sharp and mocking. Some aliens made sounds like cracking stone. Others hissed or flashed colors that meant amusement. A few nobles even leaned toward each other, clearly enjoying what they believed was a human making a foolish joke before his execution. Daniel realized instantly that he might have made a mistake. The laughter stopped. It did not fade. It stopped suddenly and completely, like a switch being turned off. The queen had risen from her throne. Her eyes were no longer curious. They were focused.
"Silence," she said. The word was soft, but it pressed down on the room like gravity.
Every noble froze. Daniel swallowed. The queen stepped forward, descending the steps of her throne. Each step echoed through the hall. She stopped only a few meters away from Daniel, towering over him. "Human?" she said slowly. "Do you understand the law you stand under?" Daniel took a breath. Running was impossible. Lying would be worse. "I understand that I was asked to choose a title," he said carefully. "Yes," the queen replied. "And you spoke one." Her gaze did not leave his face.
"In this empire," she continued, "a title spoken before the throne is binding if acknowledged by the ruler. Intention is irrelevant."
Humor is irrelevant. The hall felt colder. Daniel's mouth was dry, but his voice stayed steady. "Then I accept the consequences of my words." That caused a ripple through the court. Acceptance of consequences was rare, even among their own kind. The queen studied him for a long moment. Her silver eyes seemed to look past his body, past his thoughts, into something deeper. Then she spoke again. "I acknowledge the title." The words struck the hall like thunder. Gasps, flashes of alarmed color, and shocked cries erupted. Several nobles shouted in protest, but none dared move. "By ancient law," the queen said, raising one hand, "the human Daniel Cross is recognized as royal consort to the throne of Velar. Symbols of light flared around them. The air itself shimmered, sealing the declaration." Daniel's mind went blank. This was real. This was happening. Guards moved instantly, not to arrest him, but to position themselves around him. Not protectively, respectfully. The queen turned back toward her throne. "The ceremony is concluded," she said. "Prepare the inner chambers." As she walked away, the court remained frozen. Daniel stood where he was, his legs feeling weak. One of the human diplomats finally found his voice. "Your Majesty, this must be reconsidered." The queen did not turn. "The law is older than your species," she replied. "It will not bend." Daniel was escorted out of the hall, his thoughts spinning. He had joked his way into the most dangerous position in the galaxy. And yet, he was still alive. The inner chambers were unlike anything Daniel had imagined. There were no chains, no guards with weapons aimed at him. Instead, there was light, warmth, and quiet. Servants of different species moved calmly, bowing as he passed, their expressions mixed with fear and curiosity. He was given clothing woven with living fabric that adjusted to his body. Food was brought, carefully chosen to be safe for humans. No one spoke much, but no one treated him like a prisoner. Hours later, the queen came to him alone. She dismissed the servants with a gesture and stood across from him in a private chamber that overlooked a star-filled void.
"You are calm," she said. Daniel laughed softly.
"I don't feel calm, yet you are," she replied. "Your kind hides fear behind humor." Daniel shrugged. "Sometimes." The queen tilted her head. "Why did you choose that title?" He hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because for a moment, everything felt too serious. And because—"
"You didn't look at me like I was small." That answer surprised her. "In this empire," she said, "most speak to me from fear or desire. Bad."
"You spoke from instinct." She stepped closer.
"I accepted your title not because of law alone," she said quietly, "but because your species is unpredictable."
"And unpredictability is rare." Daniel met her gaze. "So what happens now?"
"Now," the queen said, "you live." She turned toward the stars.
"And the Empire watches." Far beyond the palace, across fleets and worlds, news spread at impossible speed. A human had stood before the alien queen. He had smiled. He had spoken a single word. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Daniel Cross learned very quickly that being alive did not mean being safe. The morning after the declaration, he woke in a chamber larger than most human buildings he had seen. The walls were smooth and curved, glowing softly with light that seemed to come from inside the stone itself. There were no windows, yet Daniel could see stars drifting slowly, as if the room floated in space. He lay still for a moment, listening. No alarms, no guards shouting, no chains. That alone made him nervous. When he sat up, the fabric he wore adjusted instantly, tightening where needed and loosening where it did not. It felt warm and comfortable, almost too comfortable. Daniel swung his legs over the side of the platform that passed for a bed and stood. The moment his feet touched the floor, The room reacted. Light shifted. A low sound echoed, not threatening, but aware.
Yeah, watching me.
I get it.
A doorway opened without a sound.
3 figures waited outside. 2 were tall Valerian guards, their armor grown directly from their bodies, eyes alert but not hostile. Between them stood a smaller alien, thin and pale, with long fingers and a robe covered in symbols. Royal consort, the smaller one said, bowing deeply.
I am Sareth. I have been assigned as your guide and interpreter of custom.
Daniel blinked. That was fast. Sareth's eyes flickered, with something like amusement. The Empire moves quickly when tradition is disrupted. That felt accurate. As they walked through the palace corridors, Daniel became very aware of how many eyes were on him. Servants paused. Nobles whispered. Some showed open anger, others fear, and a few looked at him with intense curiosity. He noticed something else too. No one touched him without permission. In an empire known for control and dominance, that stood out. "Is everyone this polite?" Daniel asked quietly. Sareth hesitated. "No."
"But you carry a title bound by law. To harm you would be to challenge the throne itself."
"So I'm a legal shield," Daniel said. "In a sense," Sareth replied.
But shields are often targeted. That did not help. They entered a council hall smaller than the Great Chamber but still massive by human standards.
Inside waited several high-ranking nobles. Their body language was stiff, their expressions tight. The queen was not present. Daniel immediately understood why. This was where opposition lived. You are human, one noble said, stepping forward. His voice was sharp. Soft! Short-lived. Explain why you stand where no Valerian ever chose to stand.
Daniel looked around. Every face expected arrogance or fear.
He chose honesty. "I didn't plan this," he said. "I made a joke. Your laws took it seriously." Anger rippled through the room. "A joke does not bind ancient power," another noble snapped. Daniel met their gaze. "Your queen disagrees." Silence fell. They hated that answer. Sarah cleared his throat. "The consort is required to observe council proceedings. He will speak only when addressed." That seemed to satisfy protocol, if not emotions. As discussions continued, Daniel listened. He learned quickly. The empire was vast, powerful, and fragile. It ruled through fear, rigid hierarchy, and unchanging tradition. Change was seen as weakness, and now a human sat in the middle of it. Hours later, Daniel was dismissed. As he walked away, he heard whispered words he was not meant to understand. Temporary, test, disposable. He smiled anyway. Later that cycle, the queen summoned him. Her private chamber was quieter than the rest of the palace. No guard stood inside. She faced a large projection of star systems, each marked with symbols of control and conflict.
You are learning, she said without turning.
I'm listening, Daniel replied. That seems safer. She turned toward him. Many wish you gone. I figured, he said. I'm still breathing, though. For now, she agreed. Daniel took a breath. Why me? You could undo this. The queen studied him. Undoing law is harder than accepting consequence, and consequences reveal truth. She stepped closer. Tell me, human, do you desire power? Daniel thought carefully. I want to survive, and I want my people to survive. Even if it means standing beside a monster? She asked. Daniel met her eyes. Monsters don't ask that question. For the first time, something like surprise crossed her face. Over the following days, Daniel was tested constantly, not with weapons, but with people. Servants brought him disputes to judge. Guards asked his opinion on strategy. Lesser nobles tried to manipulate him, offering protection in exchange for loyalty. He refused most offers. Instead, he listened. When two servants argued over blame for a supply delay, Daniel asked why the system punished honesty. When a guard described losing soldiers due to rigid orders, Daniel suggested flexibility. Small things, human things. Word spread. The human did not command. He asked questions. That made him dangerous. One night, Sareth came to him quietly. "There is concern for your safety." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "That bad? An attempt may be made during the upcoming Rite of Worth." Daniel frowned. "That sounds ominous." "It is," Sarah said. "All royal partners must prove their value to the Empire. Traditionally, many do not survive." Daniel let out a slow breath. Figures. When he told the Queen, she did not deny it. "The rite cannot be cancelled," she said. "But survival is not limited to strength." Daniel nodded. "Then I'll do what humans do best." "And what is that?" she asked. He smiled. "Adapt." The night before the rite, Daniel stood alone, looking out at the stars. He thought about Earth, about how small humanity was compared to this empire. Yet here he was, chosen by accident, alive by honesty. In the shadows of the palace, eyes watched him. Some with hate, some with hope. And the Empire waited to see if a human could survive, not as prey, not as ruler, but as something new. The rite was coming, and the galaxy was paying attention. The day of the Rite of Worth arrived without warning bells or dramatic announcements. That, Daniel realized, was intentional. In the Valerian Empire, true tests did not need spectacle. They relied on inevitability. Daniel was taken from his chamber before the stars outside had finished their slow drift. Sareth walked beside him, unusually silent. The corridors they passed through were older than the palace itself, their walls marked with faded symbols of past trials and forgotten names. "Any last advice?" Daniel asked, lightly. Sareth hesitated. "Do not assume the rite is about survival alone. Many who lived still failed." "That's comforting," Daniel said. They entered a vast circular chamber open to space. There was no glass, no barrier, only a faint energy field that allowed air to exist while stars burned just beyond reach. Platforms floated at different heights, connected by thin bridges of light. Around the chamber stood observers, nobles, military leaders, scholars. And at the highest point, the Queen watched in silence. A voice echoed through the chamber, ancient and neutral. "The Rite of Worth begins. The consort will face 3 measures: endurance, judgment, and consequence." Daniel swallowed. The first measure came without explanation. The floor beneath him vanished. Daniel fell. For a terrifying moment, his stomach lurched and his instincts screamed. Then, gravity shifted. He landed hard on another platform far below, pain shooting through his legs. Before he could recover, the platform began to move, tilting, shaking, pulling him toward its edge. The air grew thin. Heat rose. Cold followed. Daniel understood quickly. This was not about strength. It was about panic. He forced himself to breathe slowly. When the platform tilted too far, he lowered his center of gravity. When heat surged, he moved instead of fighting it. When cold bit into his skin, he kept moving. Above him, observers watched closely. "He adapts," one noble muttered, "but adaptation has limits." The platform finally stabilized. Daniel collapsed to one knee, breathing hard but alive. The voice spoke again. Endurance measured. No applause. No acknowledgement. The second measure began immediately. The platform dissolved, reforming into a chamber. Figures appeared around Daniel, holographic, yet disturbingly real. A Valerian guard, wounded, a servant accused of treason. A human colony under threat from an imperial fleet.
Judgment measured, the voice said.
Daniel realized this was worse. The guard begged for orders. If we retreat, civilians die.
If we advance, my soldiers die, the servant wept, insisting innocence while evidence appeared damning.
The colony sent a single message: surrender or destruction. There were no right answers. Daniel felt the weight of it crush down on him. He was not a ruler. He was not trained for this, but he was human. He looked at the guard. "You're asking the wrong question," Daniel said. "Don't choose who dies. Choose how many live." He ordered a controlled retreat that redirected enemy forces toward empty space. Losses were taken, but civilians survived. To the servant, Daniel asked questions, not accusations. The truth emerged slowly. The crime existed, but not the guilt. Someone else benefited. He declared a deeper investigation instead of punishment. To the colony, Daniel sent a message offering delay, negotiation, and mutual cost. Not dominance, not surrender. The holograms faded. Around the chamber, silence deepened.
"He did not follow protocol," a noble hissed. "No," another replied slowly.
He questioned it. The voice spoke again. Judgment measured. Daniel barely had time to steady himself before the third measure began. The chamber darkened. Pain exploded through his body. Not physical pain, memory. Birth appeared around him, his home, his family. Faces he had not seen since leaving. Voices overlapped, accusing and pleading. You abandoned us. You chose them.
You don't belong anywhere.
Daniel dropped to his knees. This was the consequence. To stand between worlds meant losing both. He felt something break inside his chest, not loudly, but completely. Tears burned his eyes. Above, some observers looked away. The Queen did not. Daniel forced himself to stand.
I didn't choose power," he said into the darkness. "I chose honesty."
If that costs me, then so be it. The pain did not stop, but he did. He stayed standing. Slowly, the chamber brightened. The illusions faded. The voice echoed. One final time. Consequence measured. The rite ended. For several heartbeats, no one spoke. Then, the Queen descended from her platform. She stood before Daniel, close enough that he could see the faint glow in the lines of her skin. "You did not dominate," she said. "You did not submit." Daniel's voice was rough. "I just did what made sense." She studied him. "That is rare." She turned to the observers. "The rite is complete. The consort has passed."
The chamber erupted, not in celebration.
"In argument. This changes nothing," a noble shouted.
"He weakens us. He exposes flaws we rely on," another said. The Queen raised one hand. "Enough," she said. Her gaze swept the chamber. The Empire does not fall because it questions itself. It falls when it refuses to. She looked back at Daniel. "You have proven worth not by strength, but by endurance of self." Daniel exhaled, his body finally shaking as the tension released. Later, alone in his chamber, he stared at his reflection in the living wall. He looked the same. Tired, human, but something had changed. Servants now bowed lower. Guards met his eyes. Even Sereth spoke with quiet respect. "You survived," Sereth said. Daniel gave a weak smile.
Barely. That is how all meaningful things survive, Sereth replied. Far beyond the palace, messages spread across the empire.
The human lived. The human passed the right, and for the first time in centuries, the Valerian Empire faced an uncomfortable truth. Strength alone was no longer enough, and the galaxy had begun to notice. The Empire did not change in a single day. It cracked. After the Right of Worth, Daniel Cross became a name spoken in low voices across Valerian space. Some said it with anger, others with fear, a few with quiet hope. No one laughed anymore. The Queen kept him close, but not hidden. That was deliberate. Daniel attended councils now, standing beside the throne instead of below it. He spoke rarely, but when he did, the room listened. Not because he commanded fear, but because his words carried something unfamiliar. Reason without threat. That alone made him dangerous. The first sign of open resistance came from the outer fleets. 3 war groups failed to respond to royal commands. Supply routes were disrupted. Governors delayed reports. It was subtle, careful, and coordinated. Sereth brought the information late one cycle, his face tense.
The traditional circle is moving!
Daniel did not need explanation.
They're testing the Queen.
Yes, Sereth said.
And you.
Daniel looked toward the distant stars beyond the palace walls.
Then, we shouldn't react like they expect,
the Queen agreed.
But
instead of punishment, she ordered inquiry. Instead of threats, she sent envoys. She allowed Daniel to speak to them. That decision shocked the court.
You would let a human negotiate with rebels?
A general demanded. The Queen's eyes were cold.
They are not rebels yet. They are afraid.
Daniel met the general's gaze. Fear doesn't disappear when you crush it. It hides. Against centuries of tradition, the Queen allowed Daniel to travel. His ship was small by Valerian standards, escorted but not surrounded. When he arrived at the first contested system, the local governor refused to meet him. So Daniel waited. He spoke with dockworkers, with medics, with families of soldiers who had died under rigid orders. He listened more than he talked. By the 3rd day, the governor requested a meeting.
You stand with the Queen, the governor said.
You weaken us. Daniel shook his head. I stand with the Empire.
You're confusing strength with fear. That argument spread faster than any threat ever had.
Not everyone listened. On the return journey, Daniel's ship was attacked. It happened without warning. Energy fire tore through the escort.
Hey!
Alarms screamed. Gravity shifted violently. Daniel was thrown from his seat, pain flashing through his side. Smoke filled the cabin.
Sereth shouted orders. Shield failure! Life support dropping!
Daniel pushed himself up, ignoring the pain. Can we jump?
Not yet.
The ship shuddered again. This was it. Daniel realized. Not a grand execution, just a quiet removal. Then the attackers stopped. Not retreated. Stopped. Valarian warships emerged from jump space, weapons charged but not firing. They positioned themselves between Daniel's ship and the attackers. A message came through. This space is under direct authority of the throne. The attackers fled. When Daniel finally stood before the Queen again, bruised but alive, the palace was tense.
They will try again,
Sereth said. Daniel nodded. I know. The Queen studied him. You could step back, remain protected.
Let me handle this! Daniel met her gaze.
Then they win. They turn this into a story of fear again. Silence stretched between them. Finally, the Queen spoke. Then what do you propose, husband? The word was no longer a joke.
Daniel took a breath. Let them come into the light. The next cycle, the Queen announced a convergence.
It was unheard of. All major factions, fleets, and governors were ordered to gather, not under threat, but under promise. No punishment for words spoken.
No executions for dissent. The Empire will listen,
the Queen declared, and be judged by its own people. Chaos followed. Some refused. Some prepared weapons. Some sent representatives with hidden blades and false smiles. Daniel stood beside the Queen as the hall filled once more. This time, the tension felt different. It was not fear of the throne. It was uncertainty. One by one, voices rose. We are losing control. Our enemies see weakness. Our laws no longer frighten them. When the Queen finally gestured to him, the hall quieted. Daniel stepped forward.
You built this empire to survive, he said. Fear helped.
For a time. But fear has limits. It breaks trust. It creates enemies where none existed.
A noble snarled. Spoken like someone who will never rule.
Daniel nodded.
You're right. I won't rule alone.
No one should, murmurs spread.
I've seen your people, Daniel continued. They are strong, loyal, intelligent. But they are tired of pretending that pain is proof of worth. That struck something deep. The traditional circle made its move then. Weapons activated. Shields flared. The hall erupted into chaos. Guards moved, but too slowly. Daniel did not run. He stepped between the Queen and the attackers, a weapon leveled at his chest.
Move, human!
The attacker hissed. Daniel spread his hands. If you kill me, you prove everything I've said. The weapon wavered. The Queen rose. Her voice cut through the chaos like steel. Enough! Royal authority surged through the hall. Do you... Systems locked. Weapons deactivated. Guards seized the attackers. The rebellion failed, not because of force, but because it was exposed. In the aftermath, the Empire held its breath. Executions were expected. They did not come. Instead, the Queen issued reforms. Limited authority, flexible command structures, protection for those who spoke dissent without violence. Many nobles resigned. Many stayed. The Empire did not fracture. It shifted. Daniel stood once more at the palace window, watching fleets realign, not in fear, but in coordination. Sareth joined him quietly. They will write about this for centuries. Daniel smiled faintly. I just wanted to survive. You did more, Sareth said. You changed how power is seen. Behind them, the Queen watched the stars. For the first time in her long reign, the Empire was not ruled by silence. It was ruled by choice. And across the galaxy, other species began to ask a dangerous question. If one human could do this, what would happen if humanity truly stepped forward? The weeks after the convergence were filled with quiet tension. The Valerian Empire was alive with rumor and debate. But no one dared openly oppose the Queen. And by extension, Daniel Cross. The human had survived the right, negotiated with rebels, and diffused open revolt. Now his presence alone reshaped the Empire. Daniel moved through the palace with purpose, but without arrogance. Servants greeted him with respectful bows. Guards gave him space without command. Even nobles who had once plotted against him now observed him cautiously, calculating the risk of underestimating a human who had already survived the impossible. The Queen summoned him to her private chamber one evening. The room glowed softly with the familiar light from its living walls. Outside, the stars drifted silently, painting streaks of silver across the black void.
You've done more than survive, the Queen said. Her voice carried quiet approval, but also weariness.
You've changed the expectations of every noble, every fleet commander, every governor across the Empire. Daniel leaned against the wall, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I didn't plan to. I was just me. That is precisely why this worked, the Queen replied. Your instincts, your honesty, your adaptability. No Valerian would have survived this, and none would have dared act as you have. She stepped closer, her eyes bright silver, reflecting distant stars. You are no longer just my consort. You are a symbol. Daniel laughed softly, a little bitterly. A symbol, huh? That sounds dangerous. Symbols can change worlds, she said, and you have already begun to. Outside the chamber, the Empire was beginning to settle into a new rhythm. Governors adjusted to the reforms. Fleets recalibrated their strategies, and the traditional circle, though weakened, began to watch Daniel with grudging respect.
Even the ordinary citizens of Velar whispered about the human who dared speak truth to power and lived.
Daniel knew he could not rest. The Empire still had enemies, both within and beyond. Old rivalries simmered, and distant species watched Velar with renewed attention. Yet the human felt a strange confidence. He had faced impossible trials, survived rebellion, and stood beside a ruler who valued his judgment. For the first time in his life, he sensed that his actions mattered, not only to his own survival, but to the fate of an entire galaxy. A new challenge arose when a neighboring system threatened to withdraw from Velar's protection, claiming that the Empire was too unstable under the Queen's reforms. Ships gathered at their borders, preparing for confrontation. The Queen turned to Daniel. They expect me to act as the Empire always has, she said. But now, we must show them something different.
Daniel nodded. Then we show them why loyalty comes from trust, not terror.
Let's go speak with them, directly. The meeting with the system's leaders was tense. Daniel's presence unsettled them as much as the Queen's. Yet his calm demeanor, his willingness to listen, and his straightforward honesty created a strange effect. Leaders who had come ready to declare war found themselves negotiating instead. When Daniel suggested compromises that protected lives while maintaining the Empire's authority, skepticism turned into reluctant agreement. When the meeting concluded, the system pledged to remain within Velar's influence, not out of fear, but out of respect. Across the Empire, this action spread quickly, proving that the humans' methods worked in ways force never could. Returning to the palace, Daniel found himself walking through halls that had once felt hostile and unfamiliar. Now, they seemed more alive, more connected. He saw nobles speaking openly, debating, even laughing. Guards who once glared now acknowledged him without fear. Servants moved efficiently, confident that their voices could reach the throne through him. In the Queen's private chamber, she regarded him with a mixture of pride and something deeper.
You have transformed this empire, Daniel. Not through violence, not through fear, but by being human.
By standing firm in your own way. Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of everything he had survived. I'd be in a place like this. I was just trying to stay alive. And yet, staying alive changed the fate of countless lives, the Queen said. You taught Valar that strength is not only muscle and fire. It is wisdom, compassion, and courage to act when others hesitate. Daniel looked out at the stars, thinking about Earth, about home, and about how far he had come. For centuries, the Valerian Empire had ruled through fear, and yet a single human had shown them a different path. Then, the Queen did something unexpected. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Do you understand what your title means now? Daniel hesitated. I think so. It's more than just words, isn't it? Yes, she said. It is choice, commitment, and recognition. It is trust and partnership, and it is a bond that reshapes the Empire. For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of being a symbol not only to the Valerians, but to the galaxy itself. He had arrived as a human among giants, and now he was something entirely new, a bridge between species, a living example of what humanity could achieve. In the days that followed, the empire slowly settled into a new order. Reforms were implemented, and loyalty was earned through respect and fairness. The fleets were more coordinated, communication channels opened, and distant colonies began to trust the throne again. Daniel's influence was subtle but undeniable. Everywhere he went, he observed, listened, and advised. And every time he did, the empire grew stronger. Not through fear, not through power alone, but through the uniquely human qualities that he embodied. One night, Daniel stood on a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The stars stretched endlessly, bright and indifferent. He thought about the countless decisions, the trials, the threats he had faced. He thought about how fragile and yet resilient humanity could be. And he thought about the queen who had not just accepted him, but trusted him.
"You've changed everything," Sarah said quietly, appearing at his side. Daniel nodded.
I just didn't run.
Sarah smiled faintly. Sometimes that is enough. Daniel watched a distant fleet move in perfect formation across the void. He realized that the galaxy had already begun to take note of humanity, not as weak observers, but as active, intelligent, and unpredictable players. The Queen joined him silently.
"Do you know why I accepted your words?" she asked.
Daniel thought for a moment. Because you saw something in me you couldn't see in your own? Partly, she said, but mostly because you were human. Unpredictable, honest, adaptable, and brave in ways my people had forgotten. Daniel allowed himself a small, tired smile.
"I guess saying husband wasn't the worst choice I ever made." The Queen's lips curved slightly. "It became the best decision of the century." For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of his title in a way that was not frightening.
It was powerful, yes, but not because it commanded fear. It was powerful because it represented trust, courage, and partnership. The very things the Empire needed to survive. Far beyond the palace, across the galaxy, news spread. Humans were no longer small, insignificant creatures to be dismissed. They were clever, adaptable, and capable of standing alongside the most ancient and powerful races. And one human, with a simple word and a steady smile, had become the proof. Daniel looked up at the stars, feeling something unfamiliar yet thrilling. The universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable. But so was humanity. And for the first time he knew that a human could not only survive in the galaxy, but could change it. The Queen's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "Welcome to the Empire, husband," she said. Daniel smiled, letting the words sink in. It was no longer a joke. It was a promise. And across the endless stars, one truth echoed quietly but unmistakably. Never underestimate a human who knows exactly who he is. The galaxy had learned it. The Valerian Empire had learned it, and Daniel Cross had lived it. The future was wide open, and humanity would step into it, not timidly, but boldly.